Hey guys and gals, how are you doing today? Orlando here for the Guy Blog, and today we're going to be talking UFC 196. I do want your feedback, I want your thoughts, because I have a lot of them on what went wrong with this card. We're going to focus on that and the other issues that the UFC has coming up for us. Let's see what is coming down the pipeline. You want to know the rumors, you want the results, you want to geek out over MMA and wrestling? You need to listen to the Guy Blog Podcast. Alright guys and gals, so UFC 196. Is this a letdown? Yes it is. The UFC is showing one of its weakest points. Last year we saw what they're strong at. And it was basically, as long as fighters don't get injured in training, they can give us amazing fight cards. But do they have enough high quality fighters to give us consistently good fight cards? The answer to that is a simple no, and UFC 196 is proof. What happened here? What happened here? You have a card that is a pay-per-view. The rule of thumb, and because this podcast focuses on wrestling and MMA, I'm going to talk a little wrestling. You always focus on keeping the premium product on the cards that are going to be for pay. So a pay-per-view card should be good from top to bottom. It shouldn't be good. I apologize. It should be amazing from top to bottom. Not just because you and me as fans are going to pay for this card, not because we're going to take out our hard and earned money to see these fights when basically they have fights going on every single week that we can watch. We can skip a pay-per-view, but because pay-per-views are supposed to give us premium fights. Those fights that are not just the championship fights that everybody, of course, wants to see what's going to happen with the title, but because it's going to give us fights that call us. It's going to show fighters that we're passionate about. Everybody else should be on free cards. Premium fighters should be on pay cards. And the fact that the WWE does this consistently is great. The fact that the UFC doesn't get it is not great. What am I talking about? Well, when you watch wrestling, they'll give you everything. They'll show you everybody. They can showcase all of their roster on every show they give, or at least, on the most popular shows, keep them active because the outcomes are predetermined. And because it's all written out, they do get injured, but those guys can go on and keep performing with minor injuries. In the UFC, that's not the case. Fighters at most fight, if they're really good and resilient, 4 times a year, normally 2 or 3. What this means is that when a fighter is coming into a premium fight, we have at any time a 50-50 chance of actually seeing that fight come through. That's the honest fact. As soon as they're going into a training camp where they're going to up the level of training, even though they're training every day, they're going to up it because they have a pay-per-view coming, they have a title shot coming, they have a number 1 contender spot coming. Well, the chance of getting injured is always there. You know this, I know this, we all know this. The UFC apparently has not learned to adapt to this. And that's really sad. Why? Because when this happens, the fact that they haven't adapted to it is why UFC 196 happens. We've seen it before, and we're bound to see it again because things don't look like they're changing. When you hang your hat, the hat of a pay-per-view, on the fact that one match, everybody loves heavyweights. You have one championship heavyweight fight on the fight card, and that's it. That's all you have. What do you end up having? You're basically hoping that these two guys make it, but truth of the matter is you're hoping on one guy making it. You're hoping that the champion will be there. Because if there is no champion, there is no pay-per-view. Has that always been the case? No. You can make really good fights without the champion being on the card. The problem is that the UFC has gotten into these agreements with Fox and these channels and, UFC.com, and they want to give us so much content that is so saturated that their roster is not keeping up with their commitments. And what I mean to say by that is very simply, they have enough fighters to fill all of these fight cards, but they have so many fight cards going on that they're basically just putting fights together nonstop, and they can't possibly sell us on all of them. They can't sell us on, well, their marketing team would have to get bigger. They'd have to do some differentiation to show us or be able to showcase to us every month, 10 new fighters that we believe we should be following, listening, hearing about, looking at the news, and caring about how their fight goes. That's not the case. I don't care about, everybody on a fight card. And you don't have enough guys with name recognition that, would make me want to see them fight and pay for them. When you make a pay-per-view, it shouldn't just be Cain Velasquez versus Werdum, Fabricio Werdum. That shouldn't be the only reason to purchase a pay-per-view. There should be a Cowboy Cerrone in there. There should be one of the Diaz brothers in there. There should be people that we care about on every single pay-per-view. And that's not the case. There's a reason that after Cain Velasquez pulled out, they put Stipe in and said this can still be a pay-per-view card. Why? Because we still have the champion on it, and that should be enough. However, what happened? Once the champion pulls out, you're like, Overeem, anybody we put on their place, unless their name is Brock Lesnar in the heavyweight picture, there's nobody else that will sell a pay-per-view. Why? Because we don't care about anybody else. We barely care about Stipe. Stipe is a great fighter. I have nothing against him. However, his name recognition is lacking. That is not his fault. That is not his problem, but it's the truth. His name recognition is lacking for the casual fan. I might know that he's a great fighter, but the UFC hasn't sold us on him. And the truth of the matter is, the UFC has gotten very, very comfortable on one fact, and that is they will not tell you how great a fighter is until it's his turn to go for the championship. I mean, shouldn't the casual fan know more about Stipe before he becomes a number one contender? We should know a little bit about his rise and his falls, his trials and tribulations. It sounds corny. It sounds like, this isn't a soap opera. No. But you know what seems to be? Conor McGregor. Everything he does is like a soap opera because we're stuck and glued to it. We have everybody caring about what this guy is doing, what this guy is buying, and it's not just because he's loud. It's not because he's a show off. That helps. That helps a lot. But it's because ever since this guy came in, Dana White and the UFC saw a potential gold mine. So what did they do? They put all their marketing strength behind this guy from day one. And every success he had, they put even more money into promoting him, into letting us know who he is, into showing us his lifestyle, into showing us why he's so boisterous and so special and so everything. And it's a shame because there are heavyweights. I mean, honestly, I'd have a crew just finding out what's going on with Alistair Overeem at all times. I'd have somebody finding out what's going on with John Bones Jones at all times. I'd talk to them about the possibility. I'd have fighters, especially the high profile ones, that would be ready to go up and down a weight class if needed. Not just because it'd be nice or it'd be cool. Not just because we're thinking about it. Even if we're not, I'd have a list of fighters that can go up and down just to know. And I would let them know if there might be a possibility for a title shot, at any given time, if you're willing to go up in weight. They had that, but it was fighters themselves that were telling the UFC, not the other way around. It was fighters like Benson Henderson saying, I'll move up, I'll move down if I need to. Cowboy Cerrone, I'll move up, I'll move down if I need to. I don't really care. I'm ready on 2 weeks, 1 week notice. Just let me know and I'm there to fight. And did they focus? Do they focus on promoting these guys like that? No, the only one that gets it is Cowboy Cerrone, and it was because he's always ready to fight. And he's always exciting. You know what? There are guys that might not be that exciting, like Benson Henderson, but they always show up. The UFC was so quick to get on the Showtime, train. Showtime Pettis. Yeah, here we go. They thought that he was going to be their Conor McGregor. Meanwhile, here's Ben Henderson going up in weight, down in weight, up in weight to fight all these guys. Oh, he's winning by decision. Well, you know what? It ain't easy, but he's doing all these short notice fights and he's winning them. And you know what? Even when he doesn't win, they're good fights. But you have to teach fans why they're good fights. There's a reason Floyd Mayweather was selling. There were people that understood that he was a very good defensive fighter. Everybody wanted to see him beat. Well, just make Ben like that. Make Benson like that. Make all these guys you have that are amazing fighters, make them superstars before they're ready for the title. They're doing it with Sage Northcutt. That's great, but why does this kid, he's blonde, blue eyes, but he's very green as a fighter, but you're selling him as the next big thing. That's great, but you can't put him in there against top 10 talent right off the bat. You can't put him in there against top 5 and get him to the title right away because he needs to grow as a fighter, and that's great. He's bound to lose probably at some point. It won't stop his career. It won't determine who he is, but you've been selling him, so we're interested. Well, why haven't you been doing that with Tony Ferguson? That guy's a beast, and he's the type of guy that should be on any fight card that is pay-per-view. He should be only pay-per-view. He's always going to be exciting, win, lose, or draw. And at one point, if you focus on him correctly, he can sell. He can definitely sell. Now, if he's going to sell 1 million pay-per-view buys, maybe not right now, probably not. But when his time for the title comes, he will. But you can make a big deal out of him. And if you have 2 or 3 Tony Fergusons on a fight card like UFC 196, they would be good enough and resilient enough. And you know what? You can count on them enough that you could say, you know what? We're going to keep this as a pay-per-view. It's not going to sell as much. It's going to be one of the lower selling ones of the year, but it's still a pay-per-view. And it's still a pay-per-view card with great fights. And you can set a precedent of, not every pay-per-view has a title in it, which they've done before, but you could set the precedent of if a fight card works and is a pay-per-view and has amazing fights on it, that the next day everybody's talking like, did you watch? Everybody that didn't is going to be like, crap, what did I miss? And everybody's like, well, Tony Ferguson's now the number 1 contender. This guy is now right there, ready for a title shot. This guy's moving on up. He almost broke a guy's arm. I mean, if the card works and turns out to be really good, and we know it's a 50-50 chance, but if it does, it sets the precedent that, the championship fight getting taken off of a fight card does not determine whether it is or isn't a pay-per-view card. But what did we see? This fight card, as soon as Werdum was out, no longer a pay-per-view card. Why? Because who's there? Johny Hendricks as the co-main event versus whoever? I'm sorry. No name recognition. Hendricks has name recognition, but you know what else he has? A history of pulling out of fights. And if he says that if it's only happened once, twice, you know what? Pulling out a day before, having issues cutting weight, showing up the way he's shown up the times he's actually made it in the past. I mean, his last great fight was against GSP. Besides that, nothing. A whole lot of nothing. Hasn't shown the dedication or the professionalism to make weight correctly so that he can show up to his fights with the energy we expect from him, with the conditioning we expect from him. Now, I'm not one to speak. I'm not in great shape. But you know what I'm not? I'm not an MMA fighter. You know what else I'm not? I'm not getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to show up and fight. You know what else? I haven't been a champion before. He's done all these things, and after becoming a champion, after being a number one contender and being a champion and being one of the best, what has he done? Not much. What did he do? Show up out of shape? I mean, he's actually looked worse after achieving his goal. He looks like a guy that got complacent. And now, I mean, really? Champions pull out? We're not counting on Johny Hendricks. Please, nobody cares about him. The guy is big rig is no longer big rig. He's just a rig that might need to get pulled. So this is the UFC's doing. And I like the comparison with wrestling because wrestling is on that end doing it right. One way or another, they keep themselves interesting. If an emergency shows up and they need to get a guy from somewhere else and pay the money to get him in there, they do. UFC's not doing that, especially with their heavyweight division. That is, I would care to say that everybody loves heavyweight fights, but heavyweight fights in the UFC is basically Fabricio Werdum, Cain Velasquez, Junior Dos Santos, which we know is not championship caliber anymore, and Alistair Overeem. That's it. There's nobody else there with name recognition that we truly care about if they're fighting. And out of all of those people, only Cain Velasquez and Werdum do we believe to be championship caliber in that division. Overeem might get it, but he has a glass chin. Brock Lesnar's not coming back anymore. Stipe could be a champion, but there's no marketing behind him. And then that's basically the division in there, all by itself. Not much else to talk about. I mean, what? Matt Mitrione? Not top 5. Travis? He could, but we don't see him winning out versus Werdum or Cain Velasquez. And that's pretty sad when you have two guys that you believe that they're the only ones that can run that division. And what that means that every time that division is on a fight card, if it's for a pay-per-view, it's because it involves either the champion, who's right now Werdum, or Cain Velasquez. That's it. Nobody else in there is selling that much. And the fact that the UFC doesn't go out and get more heavyweights to get them accustomed to what it is to fight in the UFC is sad. Sad, because that is a money division that does not get fed with new fighters. No new blood in there. Look at the top 15. I won't. I will not. I haven't looked at it in a long time. And I just remember that after number 6, you were just giving me random names of guys that I don't really see fight, that some are just too old. Most are too old. All of them are uninspiring at best. Names that you've never heard that trade wins and losses. That doesn't work. So the fact that UFC 196 got canceled made UFC 197 get rebranded to 196, which now messes up their chance at what they were going to do with UFC 200, and they have to think it over. I mean, this is all their fault. They keep putting a bunch of fights, a bunch of pay-per-views with 2 championship titles on the line. For what? For what? You make a really strong pay-per-view and then you make this. And then on this one, with your heavyweights, especially when one of them is Cain Velasquez, who gets injured, a lot. And you don't even have a backup plan on the card for it besides Stipe, but you didn't have a second championship fight in there. You didn't have anything to back it up. I would have put Demetrius Johnson on this card just to have another championship fight to say, okay, it's not going to sell that much, but you know what? It's Mighty Mouse. He's one of the best, if not right now, the best pound for pound in the world. Nope. This is something that we as fans have to start thinking. Are UFC pay-per-views, I mean, they're still good. I'm not saying not to watch them, but is it really worth, staying home and paying for it? I mean, go to a bar. You'll spend less than $60. You'll hang out with friends, have a few beers, have fun, and you know what? Not be disappointed because at least you had a good time with friends. But the UFC's pay-per-views, more and more, I mean, they're events, but they're not stay at home and give my $60 and have my own little, nope. I'll go out. I'll hang out with people. I don't know. And I don't know what you guys should do, guys and gals as fans, should or should not do. with your money. But the fact that the UFC still can't figure out some of their, some of their weight classes, some of their divisions, and they keep putting them on cards like this with the potential of them either being significantly downgraded or out and out canceled because one fight is not happening on it, it is crazy. I mean, UFC 196 got canceled because one fight isn't happening. The rest of the fight card is there and it's going to be for free now. But because of one fight, so the UFC is telling you as a fan, telling me as a fan, this is a pay-per-view because we were giving you one pay-per-view caliber fight. We wanted you to pay $60 for one fight. The rest we could have given to you for free. You know what that sounds like? It sounds like boxing. Sounds exactly like boxing and everything that's wrong with it. I mean, all of Floyd Mayweather's fights, people paid for them, but they paid for one matchup, and it was Floyd versus whoever. And every boxing pay-per-view is about one match, one important match. There's 5 or 6 other fights going on, but it's always about that one fight. And the fact that the UFC is actually copying that model is a slippery slope. Because if they're spreading themselves out so thin that to make everything interesting, we're getting to the point where a pay-per-view is a pay-per-view because of one fight on it and not because of all of them, that's a big problem. That's my thought, or my thoughts. Those are my thoughts on this. Let me know what you guys think. As always, Orlando, talk to you soon. Take care.